Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you're ready for another episode of Rock and Read. Let's see what Janis is up to in Chapter 6 of Janis, Her Life in Music. Ironically enough, Chapter 6 starts on page 66. So if you put that together... Okay, I think we're good now. Real quick side note, I don't know if anyone cares, but I wanted to explain myself real quick. You may have noticed that I never use the actual title of the chapter in the title of the video, simply because a lot of times the name of the chapter seems too vague. So I try to put my own spin on it. I read the chapter beforehand and then kind of try to pick a few words that sum up the chapter. I try to be a little more descriptive, yet still vague enough to put a question mark in your mind. The title I use is basically what I interpret the chapter as, so that's what's going on there. So let's get into Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called Hellraiser. As always, we have a quote from Janis at the top. This one says, "I never seem to be able to control my feelings, to keep them down. When you feel that much, you have super horrible downs. I'd run away, freak out, go crazy." That sets the mood for Chapter 6. Let's see what happens next. Back in Texas, when Janis reunited with her friends, they immediately recognized changes in her. She was more worldly, self-assured. As their crowd's sole pioneer who had ventured beyond the Golden Triangle to North Beach, she had picked up the beat lingo. She cursed more than ever, made casual drug references, and could expertly roll joints. Scraping by on the streets for a while, she discovered the emotional intensity of dangerous behavior, perhaps the only behavior that could match her live-wire feelings and the neediness inside her. It was as if she were flying on her dad's backyard giant stride and couldn't bear to get off. Not long after Janis told her friends about singing publicly in California, Jim Langdon brought her along to his friend Jimmy Simmons' gig in Beaumont on New Year's Eve. The Lamar student performed with a jazz band and invited her on stage to do a song. No one can remember which one. But instead of a soft girl singer voice, Janis belted in her bluesy Bessie Smith style. The spotlight ended after one number. "They wanted a sweet-sounding little thing for white people," Langdon recounted. "She didn't sound like June Christie, though I think she could have if she wanted to. Jimmy wouldn't let her sing anymore. He didn't like her. She was not what people were used to." Langdon, unfazed, looked for other opportunities. Among the musicians he knew, Mexican-American Ray Solis played piano in several bands at the Big Oak and Luann's. When the pair were hired to develop a jingle for a Nacogdoches bank celebrating its 50th anniversary, Langdon suggested that Janis sing it. They recorded audio for the commercial with words based on Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land." "We put cornball lyrics to it," said Langdon. "This bank is your bank, this bank is my bank. From Nacogdoches to the Gulf Coast waters, 50 years of saving, 50 years of service. This bank belongs to you and me," Janis sang in a folk style over the band. The bank didn't buy it, but that was her first recording. Janis escaped Port Arthur to hear music, driving with Terry Owens to Beaumont, where they were among the few whites at black clubs with jazz and R&B bands. Occasionally they bumped into a pair of albino brothers, Johnny and Edgar Winter, talented Beaumont musicians a few years Janis's junior. In years to come, Janis would reconnect with Johnny Winter in New York, perform together, and commiserate about their neighboring hometowns. Through Langdon, Janis met African-American trumpeter George Alexander, a former sideman for Gatemouth Brown who taught music at a local high school and played jazz on weekends. "We were getting into black culture as much as we could," Owens recalled. "We'd go to these little after-hour places in Beaumont and Orange to hear black music. Whites were allowed there, unlike segregated venues in Port Arthur." Soon after turning 19 in January 1962, Janis re-enrolled at Lamar as a commuter student for the spring semester. Because of her earlier failure there, and as an attempt to rein in her partying, Seth and Dorothy insisted that she live at home. Janis looked for alternatives, including an abandoned drive-in movie theater concessions building, which she wanted to fix up. Her parents absolutely forbade it. Janis gave in, settled into her old bedroom, and began attending classes a few days a week. At night, she worked as a waitress, singing slits, as she recalled, at a nearby Port Neches bowling alley. After work, around midnight, she'd convene with Patty Scoff, now engaged to Dave McQueen. Tearing off the hairnet she was required to wear, she'd pick up a six-pack and drive to the Scaff home. I'd sneak out, and we'd go off to drink beer and just look at the moon. Patty recounted about the pair's rejuvenated bond. Other nights, Janis met her old pal, Jack Smith, also working in Port Neches, and whose girlfriend was away at college. They took in music at Port Arthur's Pleasure Pier, and during segregated concerts by black artists such as Chubby Checker and Jimmy Reed, they listened from the parking lot. Janis railed against her hometown's racial bigotry, and was pleased when Scandal took down the town's sheriff, after it was revealed he had received $85,000 in bribes from racketeers. The State Justice Department had begun investigating him after the Beaumont Enterprise ran articles exposing graft, gambling, and prostitution in Port Arthur. As a result, most of the city's brothels and gambling parlors were shuttered. One evening, while she and Jack waited in an open drawbridge for a tugboat to pass below, Janis goaded Smith into getting out of the car and stealing a light bulb from the drawbridge gate. After he drove across the bridge, police pulled him over. At the station house, he was taken into the detention room for questioning, while Janis pleaded for his release. "The light bulb was burned out. It wasn't any good. Let him go." Janis just ate them alive, Smith recalled. He was released without being charged. On the way home, she cried hysterically, her guilt and remorse the cost of once again pushing limits. In February, Patty and Dave McQueen married and invited Janis and classmate Philip Carter to join them on their honeymoon trip to New Orleans during Mardi Gras. Carter lent his father's car to the venture since the couple had no money, about $10, Patty recounted. After splitting up and roaming the French Quarter and drinking all day, they planned to reconvene and spend the night in Carter's sedan. When Janis arrived back at the car, the other three, passed out, didn't unlock the door quickly enough to let her in, and she ran off in a drunken huff. When she returned the next day, Janis nonchalantly informed her friends that she had picked up a sailor who had a hotel room so that she could get some sleep. Janis no longer tolerated rejection from friends, even if unintentional. As a street person in North Beach, she had learned to do what it took to get by and expressed no shame about it. That spring, on jaunts between Port Arthur and Beaumont, Janis, the girl who had remained a virgin throughout high school, was clearly the most sexually adventurous among her crowd. She slept with strangers and with other women, during a time when same-sex relationships in Texas were closeted at best. Jack Smith recalled Janis's conflicted emotions about being attracted to women. At a beach party, explaining to him why she had disappeared into the backseat of a car with a girl, she said, "Alcohol makes you do funny things." When he drove her home, she asked him, "Does this make me a bad person? How do you feel about me now?" Smith later told writer Alice Eccles that he assured Janis his feelings for her hadn't changed, adding, "It just seemed perfectly natural for Janis to be so adventuresome." When Jim Langdon witnessed Janis's coupling with the Beaumont woman, she was very open about it. She just did what she felt like doing, with anyone. Janis's feelings for Patty McQueen became obvious one night while Dave worked the night shift as a radio DJ. During a party at the McQueen's basement apartment in Beaumont, Janis and Patty began kissing while everyone looked on. "We were pretty wasted and were talking to each other, and we just looked at each other and embraced and kissed each other," said Patty. "That was just a thing of love right in the middle of a crowded room of people. She and I really did love each other very much." Her husband arrived during their embrace and proceeded to get drunk as a skunk, recalled Gloria Hatson, and that caused a lot of trouble. An hour later, McQueen angrily hurled a bottle at his wife, who had passed out next to several others on a bed, including Jack Smith. Rather than hit Patty, the bottle smashed into Smith's face, knocking out his front teeth. Crying and again blaming herself for the incident, Janis drove her bloodied friend to the hospital. "We followed her car all the way back to Port Arthur," said Adrienne Haston. She was horrified that had happened. After laying low for a while, Janis would invariably reconnect with Patty like star-crossed lovers, with often damaging consequences. When Patty and Janis got together, it could be poison, Jim Langdon recounted about the nights they all crossed the river to party in Louisiana bars. A particularly rough night spot was the Shady Rest Motel Lounge, with an alligator-filled pond out back. Janis and Patty hustled the guys to play pool and buy them beers, Langdon recalled. The guys thought the girls were coming on to them and they were going to get something out of it. When they found out that they were with us, it got very testy. Following one of their late night, early morning shady rest excursions, during which the girls pulled their usual tricks with the locals, an infuriated and drunk Dave McQueen squealed out of the gravel parking lot with the girls, Langdon, Phil Carter, and Jack Smith crammed in his 1955 Oldsmobile. Flying home along Highway 90 at 100 miles per hour, he suddenly skidded out of control. Some recalled the car overturning. McQueen said he blew 2 tires and swerved off the road. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. Langdon crawled out and limped down the road until he found a phone to call his wife to pick them up. I finally drew the line and said, "I'm not going any more with Janis," Langdon said. After that, Janis and Patty drifted apart. Eventually, the McQueens moved to Houston. In Beaumont, Janis met Lamar's student Frank Davis, a folk blues guitarist and singer. Impressed with his musicianship, she picked him up and the two had a brief affair. Janis could be adorable and incredibly lovable, according to Davis, but she would swat you like a cat playing with a mouse to get you angry, even violent, so you'd be at her level of passion. As Janis saw her friends moving on with their lives, a loneliness began to take hold. To her dismay, Jack Smith had enrolled at West Point and planned to move to New York in June. Just weeks before he left, on a weekend in May with her family out of town, Janis drove her father's car to Smith's house around midnight. She suggested that instead of their usual jaunt to Louisiana, they go to Austin. He had intrigued her with tales of the Ghetto, the University of Texas off-campus party house filled with beatniks and musicians. Among them were her old friends Dave Marotti, now a third-year engineering student, his roommate Terry Owens, who had transferred from Lamar to UT, and the Stouffer brothers Tommy and Henry. At 5:30 in the morning, Janis and Jack pulled up to a ramshackle 2-story building at 2812 Nuckus Street, on a back alley not far from the university. As they wandered into the warren of apartments, most with their doors wide open, they heard acoustic guitar, banjo, and harmonica. They picked an apartment, walked into its kitchen, and there on top of the refrigerator sat a stocky man, with a blonde crew cut playing banjo. John Clay, 3 years older than Janis, was a linguistics major and budding songwriter from West Texas. "We talked and joked," Clay recalled. "She was in a fun mood and could make a whole party come alive. But I didn't know she could sing until the next night." While Jack Smith bunked with the Stouffers, Janis spent the night with Clay. The next evening, another Ghetto resident, harmonica player Pal St. John, was jamming in the backyard with guitarist Lanny Wiggins. "We were playing and Janis just sat down and started to sing," St. John said. "We were flabbergasted. She was incredible. Her vocal talents were fully formed when I met her." Clay, quite judgmental about music, was amazed by her command of style, great range, and very powerful voice, about as strong as an opera singer's. St. John, a senior majoring in art, was smitten with Janis, who was barefoot and wearing a tight black dress, her hair now hanging down past her shoulders, with bangs framing her pale blue eyes. "That night she invited me to her bed," said St. John. Full of excitement about the effect of her singing on such an intriguing group of people, and flushed from 2 sexual flings in 48 hours, Janis promised to return to Austin soon. As they pulled out of the driveway, heading back to Port Arthur, she turned to Smith with a big grin and said, "Jack, I think I'm gonna like it here." And that does it for Chapter 6. Let me know what you guys thought of Chapter 6 in the comments. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.